we are going to talk about, I went to a local lab here, and I paid cash to check the labs that I wanted to check. Now, part of this is because I'm working on my computer system for my clinic, and I needed to confirm that all of this is working. But I've also been very curious about checking some of my labs because I haven't done that in a while. And when I got my butt handed to me on a platter this summer when I checked my point of care A1C, it made me think I probably should check my labs. I probably should look. So we're going to get started on this, and we're going to start with not just showing you what the normal ranges are and what the costs were, but I'm trying to start with the highest priority. When I get to the bottom, there's a little bit of, it's not that they're not important, it's that if I was looking to spend your money, again, I pay cash, and I know a lot of people do pay cash when they want to just go get their own labs taken without a physician's prescription. So I try to do this in the order of what did the labs, what did they, order of importance. All right, so let's start. Now, for those of you that have watched the show long enough, you might have guessed that I would put A1C at the top of the list. So yes, A1C, I thought it was very interesting because these point of care tests have come out on the market, and although there was a point of care test for A1C that I just didn't like it. I mean, several times I had patients try to get this, and it didn't turn out to be as reliable as I wanted it to be. So I was really careful that I paid that $27 for this test on the exact day that I had that Omega Quant test done. Now, for those of you that have I don't know how many of you have done Omega Quant tests, but let me see if I have that on my favorites page yet. Yeah, so let me, anyway, the test that you order on our website is a point of care, and we co-brand that with Omega Quant. They're the ones who have done the research and science behind that. It's $40. There's not a big profit in there, but it is more expensive than what I was paying cash for. But most importantly, that I'm excited to say is it was exactly the same. So I've been disappointed in the past by some of the other kits that are on Amazon, wrong one. Some of the kits that are on Amazon, you'd pay for these kits and you'd have 2 or 3 tests, but when I compared them head to head to what my lab was checking, it did not match that well. So I was testing Omega Quant a little, even though they have lots of literature saying how reliable those home A1C tests are. Our team has been doing them every few months, and I was like, I wonder how accurate it is if I test it on the exact same day. So I was very happy to see that it came back exactly the same. All right, so that's where I'd put your money first. That is your average blood sugar, and it really does matter. It does predict things like cancer and autoimmune disorders, and I had a case in the 21-day course. I keep pushing the wrong one. And I had a case in that 21-day course that we put on where she said, I have these autoimmune disorders. I wonder if I should go get antibodies checked for my kids to see if they have these problems. And I'm like, don't do that. Keep their average blood sugar down. Again, this lecture that I'm going to give in Boca has made me go back to the literature and really make sure I can source the place that I'm speaking from, and so it's forced me to reread some of the places that when you look at the ideal A1C, my goal is to keep it between 4.5 and 5.0. So at 5.1, it's almost there, but when it came back at 5.6, yeah, I was not happy about that. That is definitely way too high for me, way too high for pre-diabetes. I told my husband, that's bad for brand. Again, I hadn't looked, but I was really happy to work with my gals and be accountable to get it down. All right, so yes, number 1 is hemoglobin A1C, $27. So uric acid is the next one that I would have you check. That one cost $17, and although the normal range is from 2.6 to 6.2, I think anything less than 5 is perfect. I'm not perfect, as you can see. it's 5.4. Okay, so that brings me back to why was this one really important to me? Oh, I did it again. All right, I want to show you that when I look at a couple of the ForaCare benefits. One of them is that you can actually use the strips that test uric acid inside the ForaCare meter. Now, I've said many times on here that I picked the ForaCare meter initially because it had the best strips. And it didn't take long for Keto Mojo to not only match the strips, but do a better job of the strips and do a better job of the price of the strips, which matters a whole lot. Let me grab this. So I'm going to do live here 2 checks. I have uric acid in both of them at ForaCare, and we're going to see how different they are on a live show. Oh shoot, that one's already been deployed. I have a little clicker here. Where did it go? All right. Let me just get one of these. So I pricked my finger and I can't find where my little deployers are. It's kind of messy, I guess. All right, let me just do it this way. Okay, so let's check these uric acid live. So again, the uric acid strips you can't do in Keto Mojo, but I would contend they are actually working on a strip that is for uric acid. I will have to say, after all of the hundreds of patients that I've walked through with the 6.8, 6.2, and right before the show it said 5.1 and 6.2. So this has been the hardest part with the ForaCare meters, is that the accuracy of some of these other strips wasn't as good, which is what sent me back to the literature, looking that when you have two really good meters, again, 10 years ago, we had nothing close to how well these meters work. But over the last couple of years, we've seen the meters get tighter and tighter on their point of care and how accurate they are. So even though I use ForaCare here on the show tonight, I am pushing to have my patients all use that meter by Keto Mojo because of its accuracy. The sad part is their sugars look better on ForaCare than they do on Mojo, but the Mojo was more accurate. Yeah, so, but when it comes to uric acid, that 6.1 and 6.8, it is done at the end of a fast. You should not check uric acid when you are fasting. But, and this was only a 12-hour fast that I was in, or maybe like a 16-hour fast I was in. Right now I'm at 48 hours fasted. So you'll see the uric acid rise during the end of a fast. So it's probably not too far off from accurate. All right, the next one that I did was, again, okay, so let's remind you, why do I check uric acid? Uric acid is like looking at the trash in my cells. That when the trash is really high, and it's a byproduct, it's a waste product. When people they check uric acid, they're usually looking at gout, and the gout measurements, we want them to stay less than 7, even less than 6.2 if you really want to stay out of the flare-up range. But gout is a process where the buildup of wasted proteins, of wasted nitrogen, actually. So they've just been eating too much, especially in the setting of high insulin. And so when I look at reversing uric acid, it is not easy to do that. But it is a very good predictor of how fast are you aging. So when I can see that uric acid get below 5, they're doing great. Again, I like their A1C to be lower than 5, and I like my uric acid to be lower than 5. And neither of those are lower than 5 in me, but yeah, I'm not perfect. All right, so the next one is vitamin D. Again, the first one you could do point of care for about $40. Those uric acid strips are $10 a strip. So I just spent $20 because I did one in each. I think they're about $10 a strip. And then I did 2 of them before the show. So I spent $40 because I just checked it 4 times. But those strips are pretty interesting to watch how well you can improve them. If you buy the pack of 10, and I think you can find those on my favorites page. Let's just see if I can actually go to the right page this time. If you go to the Dr. Boz favorites up here, you can scroll down and see. Let's see here. I thought there was a uric acid. Oh, it might be that when you click on here, it takes you to the uric acid page, or maybe I haven't done that yet. Anyway, that will be on the favorites page coming up in the next couple of weeks. I will have the Keto Mojo. I will have the ability for you to trade up your meter to a Keto Mojo, and I will also have uric acid on there, linked a little better than this. All right, so next we have the vitamin D. So when I ordered my vitamin D, I was actually shocked to see that it cost $85. On our website, we let you get 2 of them for $100, and again, they're point of care. The reason we did 2 of them for $100 is we often find that when you check your vitamin D, I know that it says normal is from 30 to 100, but I like them to always be, let's try that again. I like them to be greater than 50. And I even say even up to 150. I'm not concerned. So I'm happy to say my sister hangs out at the 110 range because she takes her vitamin D every morning. I don't take my vitamin D every morning, and my number's only at 46. So I would love it to be higher than 50. The reason I'm pushing patients to have their vitamin D at least higher than 50 is brain health. You have got to have a vitamin D of 50 or greater for the best brain repair. People who stay stuck in depression, they either have an iron problem or a vitamin D problem. Those are fixable reasons that their depression won't go away. There's other reasons depression won't go away, but that vitamin D is absolutely critical to get at least 50 or higher for their brains to function. Immune systems also require that vitamin D should be at least 50. It sends a signal through your white blood cells to transpose proteins that come out of your white blood cells. If that vitamin D is low, that it cannot signal the transcription of that DNA inside the white blood cells to make those proteins. Same thing goes for the brain cells. Okay, let's move on. These are going to be a little faster. Those were a little more in depth. When I'm looking at people, especially on the ketogenic diet, they're usually coming to see me because they want to lose weight. So I start with just the basic thyroid hormones. I know there's a whole bunch of ways to test thyroid, but when these 2 are normal, I can chase ghosts, meaning I can chase a lot of things, but the answer usually isn't in... there can be a few ancillary things that end up in a thyroid reverse T3, but remarkably, I find, especially if they're close to 1 on both of those, TSH and free T4, collectively that gets you north of, almost $70, $68 for checking your thyroid if you're going to pay cash. The next layer that I check is iron studies, and again, people that come to see me on the ketogenic diet, they want their metabolism to work well. And I focus a lot on brain health. So they're coming to me to say, how well is my brain working? And I will take a slight moment to rant about how important it is that when patients come to see me and they say, Doc, I just can't seem to be getting better. I've been on these antidepressants for a long time. I'm not feeling well. And I check their iron studies, and they are woefully undersupplied for their iron. When you build the neurochemistry in your brain, I'm talking serotonin, norepinephrine, the dopamine, the types of signals that allow one neuron to talk to the next. The basic building block for those components in your brain is iron. And if your iron studies are low, the chances that you're going to have a way out of the ditch from depression becomes almost zero until you fix the iron. It is a critical part of taking care of broken brains. Is without normal iron studies, we fail. I mean, not only is it a depression thing, but it also is a peak performance. If you do math for a living, for heaven's sakes, your iron needs to be high enough. And the other part that I am really careful about is, let's go over here. If you go to you might have noticed, I know some of you noticed, let's quick see if I can share this, that on the website, under store, you can see that there's a new product. And it's because I have a lot of you that will not eat liver. And I'm telling you, that source of beef liver I'm so proud of where that liver comes from, that it is worth showing you that is now for sale. I'm going to talk more about that a different day. But it really dovetails into when I go to replace someone's iron. If there are two places in the universe that you can get iron from. One is called elemental iron. Elemental iron comes from the elements. So it's in the soil, it's in the dirt. When you eat vegetables and you say, hey, it's high in iron. Well, it's only high in iron if the roots of that vegetable were able to reach iron in the soil and then put it in the spinach leaf or whatever it is you're eating that's high in iron. But even if you do that, the most perfect iron absorption, the gut that is in perfect health, a teenager, lean, healthy, never been overweight, not anemic, their beautiful, perfect gut lining, when we tag the elemental iron, we know that the perfect gut can only absorb 10% of that iron. 90% of it goes down the toilet. It is difficult to absorb when that iron has only been elemental iron and has never been hemoglobin iron, which is the other kind of iron. Hemoglobin iron means that it has been in a circulation. I don't care if that circulation is a cow or a beef liver. I don't care if it's a pig or a duck or a moose or a snail. It's been in circulation, and when the iron is attached to hemoglobin, and we tag it, again, in these perfectly healthy guts, over 90% of their iron gets absorbed. Only 10% goes out in their stools. So when we take healthy people to healthy people, we can say, wow, there's a huge difference. But now take the patients that come in to see me. They're sick. They've been depressed. They have immune systems that don't work. Their gut lining is not healthy. So when you take 10% of the absorbable iron in an elemental iron, which is what is in it's in what all iron tablets that don't come from liver, which is the most concentrated organ with iron in it. When you just take elemental iron and you say, hey, I put it in a capsule and I'll take it every day, the absorption problem is still there. They can still only absorb 10% if their gut is healthy. But when they have riddled guts with inflammation, it takes me like I never reach normal iron levels when I'm asking that gut to do there. I end up using IV iron to get their iron normal. I skip their gut, put it right in their vein, and try to short circuit the outcome because I can't wait for the brain. The brain can't make the next step until the iron was replaced. All right, so now knowing that, several of you have written in saying, but what if your ferritin's high? Okay, so let's take a look at my labs. Go back to the right one here. All right, so we've done thyroid. Here come my iron studies. Okay, so my iron level of 88 was normal. That cost me $17. My ferritin, which this is the part where I say, make sure you look at your ferritin. The ferritin should always be greater than 50. Okay, well, mine's clearly greater than 50, but it's in the abnormal range. It's up to nearly 500. So is that dangerous? You Google it and it says, oh my gosh, that's iron overload. No, that's not iron overload. Let me teach you a few things. Okay, so iron is what we're looking at. That's what we're measuring. I'm in the normal range for that. The ferritin is a protein. It is a protein that delivers iron to your body. Think of it as the bus that's carrying iron. And I have a bunch of buses carrying iron. The next question is what is your iron binding capacity? Meaning, what's the seats that are filled with iron on your buses? And my iron capacity says that if you have a high iron, this is an inverse relationship. If you have a high iron capacity, it means there's a lot of empty seats. If you have a low iron capacity, you have less empty seats. So you're carrying more iron. These two are proportional. They're related. So because this is so confusing, it is the inverse, like total iron binding capacity. So if there's a high number, there's a lot of empty seats on your bus. If there's a low total iron binding capacity, then there's no empty seats on your bus. That's what iron overload looks like. So the next thing we look at is what is iron saturation? So we never want this to be less than 20. But when we look at dangerous levels, it gets that the iron, the total iron saturation is. How saturated are these seats on the bus? So when my iron saturation is 33%, it's saying essentially that 1/3 of my seats on the bus are holding iron. That is not iron overload, okay? But why is that ferritin high? We're going to get to that. So iron is not an easy, by just checking iron, I don't learn anything. I almost wouldn't check that. Okay, it's part of the equation. You need it to do this math, so you have to check it. But be sure to get the ferritin. The ferritin is really important. That one does cost $32. And then this, essentially this is math. It's really not a lab at all, but that cost an extra $60. So for this iron studies, that's about $100. I would say that's worth it. To me, that's a really important part of the equation for how well, I talk about brains, but when you look at iron, it is also another key component for how well is their cortisol doing. Are they in adrenal fatigue, which I don't like that word, but everybody understands it. All right, so we're gonna get to the next panel, which is what are the vitamins that I would check? Yes, I check iron, that's a vitamin. I check vitamin D, but that's more like a hormone. So the vitamin D was for your whole body. That's one of my top 3 tests. Iron is next on the list. And then these vitamins, I want you to notice. The vitamin B12 is $31. I wouldn't spend... Okay, vitamin B12 is really important, especially if you drink excessive alcohol, or if you are not, if you're vegan, you can find B12 getting lower. Folic acid always is actually a precursor for that. If your folic acid is low, it usually happens before the B12 is low, so doing them in combination is really helpful. This lab right here, methylmalonic acid, is actually the best predictor for whether or not B12 is actually low. We see a lot of false positives. We see B12 being called normal when it's not really normal. And in that case, the methylmalonic acid will be abnormal. But look at how expensive that is. I just love Omega Quant. So Omega Quant, I don't co-brand this one, but if you go to their website, you can actually order a methylmalonic acid in the urine for something as little as like $30 or $40 to see. If you think you're low on B12 and you don't want to check your blood, the urine methylmalonic acid is actually more accurate than the vitamin B12 or the folic acid, and you can do that without a prescription from me. So if you want that, you can go there. So let's just look. My vitamin B12 was very normal. My folic acid was lovely. Anything above 3 is good, and I was in the 4s. And then my methylmalonic acid was perfect, 117. So I'm not low on any vitamins there. So far, I'm a little low on vitamin D because I'm not as good at taking my vitamin D as my sister is. I keep thinking, I live in Florida, darn it. I shouldn't I just get it while I go outside, but it means I can't spend so much time in the office. Now, the next 2 labs I checked, but they would not make the list for something I would check in patients. I've always wondered what mine are, and mine came back normal for both zinc and copper, but they're really esoteric. They do not teach me much. It's really rare. I checked them in people who actually have had gastric bypass. But I also wanted to know what was the real cost. So they're pretty expensive. For $100 each, I would not do that again. It doesn't teach me anything. They really correlate heavily with iron. So when the iron is low, if I've replaced the iron and things are still not going well, then sometimes I'll check a copper or a zinc. But as you can see, they're really expensive. There's usually skin issues with people. So when their skin looks healthy, I tend not to waste their money on that. All right, the next thing we're looking at is a comprehensive metabolic panel. This whole thing was $30 or $27, and a whole bunch of things came back. So I did this lab at about 11:30 in the morning, and I had coffee. I had ordered black coffee, but there was, I ordered it off my app, and I accidentally had a little splash of cream in there, so it wasn't a perfect fast. I didn't tell the lab that, but my sugar was fine. BUN, creatinine are a way to look at your kidneys. Really the best way to use these is to look at your estimated glomerular filtration rate. So this is really looking at what percentage of my kidneys are functioning. And so when you get a 95% on this math, it says your kidneys are doing great. This BUN and creatinine ratio is another way to look at your kidneys. So that's all pretty straightforward. This is my electrolyte panel. My potassium did come back slightly outside the range of normal. I don't think of that as abnormal actually at all. These are just, again, other places, all these came back normal. This is also part of that complete metabolic panel, and this is really kind of the liver section. So alkaline phosphatase is made by bones and liver, and that was normal. My AST and ALT are also liver enzyme measurements. For $27, it's a pretty good list of a whole bunch of things, but you really kind of got to study it to know if do you have a kidney problem? Do you have a liver problem? I like the AST and the ALT to always be less than 25. My AST, I would love that to be a little lower, but it's not bad. It's just I like it in the 20s. So I wish it would have been a little lower. All right, so now the good one. I did order a lipid panel on myself. Again, one of the other things that you can check on a ForaCare is you can check a total cholesterol. I did not bring those strips back here, so I'm not going to check those live. I don't find these as useful, but I think it's worth checking on the ketogenic diet to show you what mine was, and then what am I going to do about it? All right, so first of all, a lipid panel, cash, cost about $40. I think it's worth it, but I would definitely be doing it in conjunction with a couple of other things. So let's show you my numbers. The total cholesterol came back elevated. So it's never supposed to be more than 200, and mine was 276. Frankly, don't care. Kind of proud of that. Triglycerides, you always want to be less than 100. Again, I wasn't exactly fasting when I did this, and you really want to be fasting. I had a little bit of cream in that coffee. So 88 is pretty good for knowing what I had eaten. My healthy cholesterol, my good cholesterol, was over 100. And for those of you that have watched my cholesterol lecture, I have another particle size that I checked on my labs that I'm not going to cover tonight, but I'm going to use this lipid panel and the particle size data to do some teaching. But I want you to notice how low my VLDL was. So again, VLDL is the cholesterol that is emptying out the triglycerides. So when it gets down to this low, it's a sign I do not have a high residency time in my blood. Residency time stands for when cholesterol is meant to fuel your body. It's meant to, it's a source. What we're measuring in this lipid panel is how much cholesterol are you circulating, and what are the little carrying units that are delivering it to your body. Too much cholesterol, too much cholesterol in circulation that doesn't get recycled is when it starts to oxidate. That's when it starts to become more damaging to the insides of your blood vessels. That when the VLDL cholesterol is that low, I don't ever really look at this. I'm studying it my own, but it's a hint that when my bad cholesterol, my LDL cholesterol came back high, I don't worry when that VLDL is that low and the LDL cholesterol, even though they like it to be less than 100, I'm not worried. But it's not because I stopped there. When you really look at cholesterol, the parts that I like patients to take notice of is my triglycerides were 88, my HDL was 107. So if you take 88 divided by 107, that ratio should always be less than 1.5. When you're down into when your triglycerides are lower than your HDL, that's a really good sign. So I'm not worried about this. This ratio also gives me a hint about how long is that cholesterol staying in circulation. How high is of a residency? That's time in circulation. Do you have? And I don't pretend to think that this is pretty complicated stuff. So that's why I'm going through it. But here's the most important part that adds to this equation. This is going to bring ferritin back into our discussion. I don't want to talk about this one yet. I'm going to come back to that one. I want to talk about this. Okay, so I'm watching in the chat, and I want to know if anybody knows what a sed rate is. I'm going to talk about ferritin for just a second, and then I'm going to come back and talk about sed rate. So remember earlier, my ferritin was elevated. It was almost 500, and the lab says it shouldn't be more than 150. So if you know what a sed rate is, I would love for you to type it in. I'm going to type in sed rate. So it's a little bit of a delay that I get to see the comments, but I want to see if anybody knows what a sed rate is. What I want to show you after I explain what sed rate is why I order every stinking time for 20 plus years that you should have a highly sensitive C-reactive protein. Now, people screw this up and they say C-reactive protein. Yeah, there you go. Very good. Okay, so now they're answering the sed rate stuff. So the answers that came back in were non-specific for inflammation. That's what a sed rate is. A sed rate is actually measured by units of time. How fast do these erythrocytes, these red blood cells, settle over time? So if you think of this as your test tube here, and you fill your test tube is filled with blood, there's a whole bunch of red blood cells in here, right? And then they measure how long does it take to settle, does the sediment take to acquire at the bottom. And so it sits there and they measure how long does it take for these red blood cells to sink to the bottom. So if you look at all the other stuff in the way in the blood, you have your red blood cells, but they're suspended in this serum. But the other stuff in the serum is a bunch of proteins. And when the proteins are in excess, there's too many proteins in your blood, that's a sign of inflammation. So yes, a sed rate is meant to predict how much stuff is in the way in this tube of blood. So, I mean, you'll see them all settle down here at the bottom, and someone is measuring the time. It's a really cheap test because it doesn't take a lot. It's not very complicated. But when we see sed rates in the single digits, we say, oh, there is not a lot of proteins in the way. There's not a lot of inflammation. In that same respects, when I am looking at a C-reactive protein, there is a common mistake that people do not order the highly sensitive C-reactive protein. They order just a C-reactive protein. You'll know if you get the price of a C-reactive protein is a few dollars. A highly sensitive C-reactive protein is $32. So let me explain the difference. So if you look at all these proteins, like in a sed rate, in this test tube, we're saying, well, how long does it take for these red blood cells to settle to the bottom of the test tube? And we know that there's thousands of different types of proteins that are getting in the way. When you look at C-reactive protein, there's a whole bunch of proteins that are reactive. That second word in there is the word reactive. And what does it mean to be a reactive protein? It means that your body made it as a reaction to something. So that's what inflammation is. Inflammation responds, inflammation is our response, and is it appropriate? Does it peak and then settle back down, or does it stay this blaring noise in your body? And there's a whole bunch of different types of C-reactive proteins, but there's one that's called highly specific because it's specifically made on the endothelial lining inside your blood vessels. So if this is your blood vessel and you looked down the tube in here, the skin lining on the inside of that tube is where this highly sensitive C-reactive protein is made. And that is, what is the inflammation on the insides of your red blood cells? And if that protein is high, that predicts a heart attack. When I take a look at that in the setting of a high LDL cholesterol, that makes me say, you have got to decrease the inflammation in your body. You really have to wring that out. The other thing that I use to separate so let me just show you C-reactive. My C-reactive protein was lovely. It was less than 1. So you want it between 0 and 3, or at least always less than 3. I like it less than 1.0 for sure. The lower, the better. When I look at my ferritin of 500, ferritin is also another protein. It is a reactive protein, and it can raise and cause the ferritin level to be very high for a host of reasons that don't necessarily correlate to a whole body inflammation. My whole body inflammation is very low. I have a SED rate less than 5. It was actually less than 5, meaning it was so little we couldn't. That it was taking too long to say. It was taking way too long to. Actually, no. I'm saying it the other way. It was so quickly that it settled out that we don't think there's any extra proteins in your system. My highly sensitive C-reactive protein, the specific one that's made on the endothelial lining of my arteries, is also very good. These tests, I can believe, they're hard to screw up. Ferritin, easy to screw up. Ferritin is complicated. When I see my ferritin's high, do I think, oh my gosh, I have iron overload? No. Go back and look at those iron studies again. The percentage of seats that are filled with iron in my body is only a third. That's not too much. It's plenty to keep my brain working right. It's plenty to keep me nourished. I'm not worried about being malnourished in the respects to C-reactive, to having too high of a ferritin. Okay, so I know the last slide that I flashed past was LP little a. And if you go back and look at it, I'll make you guys rewind that because I'm not going to go back and do that. I'll do that on the next one because I see that we are a long ways into this story. And I am going to do another slide deck on what was my particle size for my cholesterol. And I will describe LP little a. But here's the cliff notes. I would put LP little a as high as I put vitamin D. I think that is a hugely valuable asset to be looking at to say, are you healthy? All right, so I told you I'd give you a very a discount. Yes, I want you to buy those the bags that I have to throw away at the end of the year. If you're looking for great Christmas gifts, please consider giving them a bag of Keto Combo. But there are some. We had a hell of a problem with supply chain during COVID. Some of them we couldn't get posted on the websites, and then some of them we couldn't move. And then anyway, there are several of the Dutch chocolates that are going to expire. And so we are selling them at 50% off. So if you go to the Dutch chocolate on our website, bozmd.com, find the Dutch chocolate BHB and type in this promo code NOV50 November 50, we'll take 50% off until the supplies are gone. I think there's only a few dozen of them that are at this expiration date that's coming in the next couple of months. But I don't like that. I don't like them to get close to the expiration date. And I would have them in my family. I'm not afraid to use them. I just know I can't sell them once they're past the expiration date. And God knows I need all the help I can get selling products. I'm a great doctor. The salesman side of this stuff is not as easy for me. So, all right. So that does bring me to a couple of things that I will give updates for. And I mean that when the folks stick around to say, well, what are the best labs to have done? I know that daylight savings time has wrecked my last week, but checking the numbers and really keeping track of what your body's system is, I mean, I am definitely guilty of that. Before the point of care stuff, I don't know if you know how hard it is for a doctor to go in and get labs done for themselves, to get another doctor to do it. I suppose it's no harder than anybody else, but I was not doing it. So I got my labs checked, hopefully to not only check my system in preparation for patient care, but also to show you which ones I would care about. We do have some pretty interesting things coming up in the next month of November, so stick around for that. We announce them here on Tuesdays. If you have not signed up for our email list on bozmd.com, please do that because we have a couple of really cool Christmas specials packages that are worth about $800 that we're trying to put them on sale for somewhere between $270 and $300. The shipping costs actually have been a nightmare the last 2 months, like insane increase in shipping costs. So I'd love to give it for you to around $270, but the shipping costs might push me up closer to $300, but it's a hell of a good deal. So I will announce that on the email first and on the show. But if you're looking for a really cool gift, I'm excited to share that with you guys. Let's see. I am going to go to the questions now. So Cheryl actually just wrote in and said, Quest and LabCorp do walk-in labs. Yeah, that's what I did, but you can only get certain labs done at Quest and LabCorp as a walk-in. You need a doctor's prescription to get most of the ones done that we just talked about here today. I mean, I think about 80%. Actually, I don't know the percentage. I know it's more than I thought it'd be a little more forgiving than that, and it wasn't. Okay, so let's go to your questions tonight, because this is the one place I do be sure to answer your questions. Where is that button? Here we go. Come on. There we go. All right, so Krista wrote in first saying, hi, Dr. Boz. Speaking of labs, what does low creatinine mean? Mine was 0.46. My GFR is 120. Liver function is good. Okay, so GFR of 120 means that you have 120% of your kidney function. Again, it's a mathematical equation. When a creatinine is low, it means you're cleaning your blood really well. Your kidneys are doing a really good job of removing that debris from your blood system. The GFR is a calculation saying, well, how good is the kidney doing? Mine was 95%. It's 95% perfect. Yours is more than perfect. It's mathematically beyond what we were guessing. So it's good. I'm on your protocol and feel great, but wondering what the low creatinine means. So congratulations on the improvement. Your kidneys and liver think it's great. So keep up the good work. All right. What lab do I check for insulin resistance? Okay, Brian, that's a good question. I have gone full circle on this. I have done the HOMA IRs. I have battled with the labs and spent literally $2,500 for one Kraft insulin test. For those of you that don't, I've lectured on this a couple times. The Kraft insulin test is like doing a blood glucose or glucose tolerance test, like they do in pregnancy, to say, have the woman come in fasting, check her blood sugar, give her a bunch of sugar, and then check her blood sugars every 30 minutes for, I think it's 3 hours. There's one that's 2 hours, there's one that's 3 hours. Kraft, this is a pathologist, said, let's do that and check insulins at the same time. How much insulin is it taking to keep that blood sugar controlled? And so when they would have these normal blood sugars, but the blood sugar was like delayed, it wasn't, the spike in blood sugar was a little weird. It was usually happening with such a heavy blanket of insulin everywhere that you were missing the people with the pathology because they weren't checking the insulin. Well, if you try to get that done in a lab today, unless you own the lab, not only do they charge the patient over $2,000 to get that test done, they mess it up most of the time. So then you can do a home IR. There's several other places you can do this. You can do a fasting insulin, but I contend the fasting insulin should be done like in a hospital where you're sleeping. They wake up, check the insulin. When you start to rise and get in your car, get your clothes on, God forbid you shower, and even though you're fasting, you drive to the lab, somebody nearly rear ends you, there's stress, it raises your insulin. So you really don't get an honest check of what their insulin is when you're sending them to the lab to do it. And then insulin is not very common. So then they say insulin, and then they have a little stress about, well, is it really insulin they're checking? And they do all this drama. Yeah, so I have just found that is not, I don't get authentic assessments of what I'm looking for. The tests I went through tonight, okay, minus the copper and zinc, are ones that I'm like, no, I can rely on them. There is enough standardization in the tests, and there is enough reliability in the way the test is done and the way the blood is preserved that I can be confident in the results. I cannot be confident in insulin responses because of how volatile it is. And this is where I've really come back to say, looking at average blood sugar, which is hemoglobin A1C, it misses people. It's not perfect. But then also looking at what is your morning fasting glucose, your morning fasting ketones. That's why I check these numbers. I don't do this because it's fun. I do this because what is my insulin 48 hours into a fast? When I can get a Dr. Boz ratio less than, whatever it was today, the lower the Dr. Boz ratio, the lower the insulin impact. Because even when we would find insulins that were high, we needed to know, well, how well is that insulin controlling their blood sugar? which is what a Kraft test would tell you. But it's so stinking expensive. And then I would want to do a Kraft test every other week until they're better. I want to know over time, how well are they progressing? Well, all of that is far too expensive. Keeping track of fasting blood sugar, fasting ketones, again, test on toilet, TOT. Sit your butt on the toilet and don't get up until you check your fasting glucose, fasting ketones. That teaches me a ton. There's less noise in the data. I can rely on it. Even when you're using the meter that's not as accurate, the stability of their sugar is really important. I have had a few people where I said, you have got to send your ForaCare meter in, where every single one of their blood sugars was the same for 3 weeks. I'm like, that's mathematically impossible. You need a new meter. If you flatline on your ForaCare, upgrade to one of the Mojos. I do really like Mojo's meter. It is very impressive. They've done some nice upgrades, and they need the praise and the reward for how good their meter really is. It takes a lot for me to say that because I have been such a fan of ForaCare, and I do like how ForaCare's has just really delivered on quality. But times change, and Mojo's meter is really amazing. It's really better than it was when I first looked. All right, so if you are, let's do a couple more questions, and then I'll check my blood sugar again before I leave, and then we'll go see what the election results are. Let's go back to the questions. Here we go. All right, so there's Brian's. Okay, Brian, you should tune in for the follow-up question, the follow-up lab test that I'm going to do, because between that LP(a) and my NMR particle size, I will be doing, you'll learn a lot from that one. Okay, anyway, what are the key labs for heart health? Yeah. Again, hopefully you see that at highly sensitive C-reactive protein, I really like to see their A1Cs in between 4.5 and 5.0. And then your uric acid should be less than 5, in the 4s. Okay, I'm not there yet. I know that I'm saying this without mine being perfect, but those are a much better predictor of, are you making inflammation? So where did I get these labs done at? In my clinic, I have aspirations of seeing people from all over the country. So one of the hardest parts about getting the clinic back going is to been integrating into the 2 labs that are found across the country, and that is LabCorp and Quest. And let me tell you, oh my goodness, I hope I don't give up. Praise God for Michelle, who was helping me. I said, the way we get to the first patient is going to be a wing and a prayer on her, because it is really a lot. But that one was done by LabCorp, and I sent my husband to Quest. Quest has not done their job yet. I've got a problem with Quest yet. Well, we'll figure it out. Calm down. We'll get it there, but it's annoying. Okay, let's go back to these. A couple more questions. So Naoma says, what's the test for uric acid? Yeah, the test for uric acid is definitely looking at the trash in my cells. I want to know, how clean are my cells living? It's one way that I measure how rapidly is the patient aging. And when it's above 12, I don't care how skinny you are. I don't care that your A1C is normal. It has to be, you have to get that uric acid out of there. And really, autophagy is, and routine fasting is a really important part of how to accomplish that. There's a gal who comes to my support group, a very fun person that I've met in Tampa. Her name is Ginny, and she was, when I was teaching people how to start a support group, she was one of the volunteers that showed up and welcomed me to Florida. But we tested everybody's uric acid, and hers was 12. And she was so proud. She had lost all this weight with keto. She was teaching her family. And I was like, no, check it again. And again, it was like 11.7 or something really high. And so I said, I know that you've done a lot of things that are great, and she's in her 70s. So I said, you really need to be doing a 72-hour fast once a week. You're keto adapted, you're doing great, you've had all the success. But if you want to reverse the aging of your cells, if you want your brain to have the best brain health, you've got to get that uric acid down. Well, by golly, she did it. And she did, at least 8 weeks of 72-hour fast. It might have been longer, a longer succession of that. And the next time we checked her uric acid, it was in the 6s. So she was able to do that over like a 6-month period. You do not change uric acid quickly. It is a difficult thing to change. And she looks at, she said, I didn't think I had another 20 pounds to lose or whatever she lost more of. But her uric acid was really my clue that there's more going on under the hood than she was aware of. So that is a great question. I get that question a lot. All right, Aloha22, you had some great questions last week too. Okay, does an intake of iron supplement cause constipation? Okay, oh, that's a great thing. I did not bring that point up either. So constipation happens because that elemental iron is being pooped out. So that last section of your colon, when you put iron in it, it just kind of paralyzes. I mean, it really makes it hard to move the stools along. Ask any pregnant woman who starts taking a multivitamin with iron in it. That's elemental iron. Their stools turn dark, and that's the iron that you're putting out the toilet, because 90% of it in the healthiest of people cannot be absorbed. When you take iron from liver, and of course I'd love you to eat liver, but I've been told by many of you that you're not doing that. So I sourced awesome liver, grass-fed beef liver. This took me forever. I should have had this supplement out 2 years ago, but I couldn't get it done. I am so thankful that it's available now. If you have, the iron saturation should never be less than 20%. It should be in the 30s and 40s. That process of keeping enough iron around for your brain to make the molecules that improve depression, that keep your brain working well, that is critical. It is critical, especially for all those young girls whose iron goes down once they start menstruating. Don't do that. That's hard on their brain development. If you want them to be engineers or doctors or scientists, they need that part of their brain that uses iron also does math and science and engineering. So don't get me started on that. It'll take you a long time. And oh my goodness, it's 7 o'clock. I need to have a wrestler to go pick up. Let me do one more. Let's see here. I'll do the last 2 questions really quick. So Gail says, is cod liver oil bought in tins a good source of iron? Yes. Yes, I usually can't get people to eat it, so you win. Last one, is the fasting that you often recommend advisable if you are iron deficiency anemic? So honestly, I would not be doing a fast. I mean, your body is telling you if you're iron deficiency anemic, I would be getting on those iron pills. I mean, I would recommend up to 6 of those pills a day. And the reason for that is you have to replace the iron before any of these other hormones can work correctly. When people write in and say, keto just doesn't feel very good to me, I mean, my brain instantly says, what aren't you making? What aren't you doing well? And as much as I don't like to be in the middle of everybody's, saga, I like you to be able to test on your own and learn these things on your own. I don't come here on YouTube and share all my lab data because it's not helpful. I want you to see this is the same plan I have to have for me. And if my iron was low, I'd be giving myself IV iron or be eating liver twice a week until that iron was normal, because you cannot fix this. You cannot absorb, you cannot heal, you cannot think, you can't believe how quickly that brain ages when you spend time iron deficient. Not okay, ladies. Don't do that. Don't. And I wouldn't have you fasting. I mean, I would have you doing a sardine fast, or maybe join Gail and do a cod liver fast, 3 days, only cod liver. Get that iron up. It is that important. All right, I got a kiddo who is at the wrestling room right now saying, Mom, where are you? So I do want to know that the end screen, which is the little bitty box at the end of this video that we put on the end, I have several of the tests that I went through today that are point of care, that are home tests. And because I was a little scattery when I was teaching them, watch this video at the end to see which ones you can do at home. All right, guys, thanks again. We'll see you next